Greetings of the season, everyone. Welcome back to the Tech Factor podcast by Purple Quarter. Today in the room, we have Jyoti. Jyoti, thank you so much for doing this on a weekday at your office. Thanks for inviting us over.
Nice to meet you, Rupa. Happy to have this conversation.
Awesome. So, Jyoti, let's begin with something interesting that we found on LinkedIn, right? So, you've put this up right up on LinkedIn saying that you dream it, I build it. Now, let's begin with that. So, what, aspiration that you had or inspired you to put that up on LinkedIn?
So, what I figured out midway my career is I like building things, right? And given a problem statement, especially if it appears very hard, then it excites me even more, and it's a key driver for me to get things done. While saying that, I generally, in terms of business ideas, when I started out, middle of my career, that time I was trying out my own ideas.
Okay.
And what I figured out is I generally may not have the best implementable ideas, business ideas, right?
Okay.
So then I just one day I just said, okay, I need someone to dream something, and then I'll build it, right? I'm not a big dreamer, but I'm a good builder. So that's where I hacked up that line.
Okay, that's a lot of honesty out there, Jyoti. So, just for the audience to know who Jyoti is, I'm sure most of them already do, but I'd like to introduce you formally. So, Jyoti's done his BE Computer Science and then his Masters in Computer Science and started off on with R&D side, and you
Yeah.
moved to a couple of companies. I'll just pick the last three names because, and of course, one of my personal favorites, Dev Factory, you were with them, then you
Yeah.
were with Go Ibibo, then you moved on to Walmart, from Walmart to Angel, right?
Yeah.
So, that's been your journey. I see that you've been part of organizations as an individual contributor, and then you're donning the hat of a CTO. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey so far.
Sure. So I've been a techie at heart, right? And when I started off, I wanted to do core R&D tech work, right? So and deep problems always interested me. And I played different hat at different places. So even before I was on IC, the first startup I did in 2009, I actually led the whole tech team as well,
Okay.
right? And then we did an exit. After that, what I figured out I got tired of the admin stuff and said I want to focus on pure problem solving and
Very
pure
nice.
ICs, right? So that's where I kind of got into the IC role, and and I generally, one of the other things I realized is I'm also able to articulate a problem to a larger audience pretty well,
Okay.
even as an IC, right? And I think that is a force multiplier that you need, right? Otherwise, if you're just coding, I
True.
mean, your impact kind of remains curbed, right?
Right.
So that always was there, right? And honestly, if you look at it, I mean, obviously there's a flavor of people management that gets in with the CTO, but the core job is still the same, right? Having a vision and communicating the vision to the team, having enabling them to do things, becoming a force multiplier rather than someone who is who gets into detail too many of their details in their lives, right?
Sure.
I think there's a lot of similarities in both the roles, I would say.
Right. And if I were to actually take a cue from what you said, right? You dream it, I'll build it. And also what you've just said, that I'm able to articulate from a business perspective, a tech to a business. Is that the reason why you became like one of the investors, an angel, avid angel investor, I must say, and also advisor for a lot of firms?
Yeah, absolutely. I found that it was many of my friends started out, and angel investing started out as helping out friends, right?
Very
Bangalore
nice.
is a very small tech space, as you know.
Sure.
So it started out, and I found that people struggled with few core things, right? One is what is the actual product mix that they want to offer as an MVP,
Okay.
because when you're just starting out, bootstrapped, fresh, right? There's a whole bunch of things you can do,
Correct.
right? And only 5% of that will actually influence customer choice. Rest 95% is just there for for reasons of possibly completeness and add-ons, right? But only the 5% are the core things that the customers care about, right? So how do you focus on that? How do you identify them in the first place, right? That was a problem for many founders,
Sure.
right? Secondly, how do you keep things simple, right? How do you find the essence of the problem to be solved? What trade-offs do you do, right? For
Correct.
example, one of the startups I advised in e-commerce seller space, right? They wanted to create a lot of dashboards for sellers. So if you are, let's say, selling mobile phones on Flipkart or Amazon, they wanted to create a dashboard on how things are doing in a lot of geos, etc., etc., right? And their stuff which they started out was very complicated. So
Okay.
one question I asked them is, what level of freshness do you need for a seller? Right? Do you need the seller to instantly see that Raipur is picking up versus Bombay, or does the seller actually only want to look at it, let's say end of the day or maybe twice in a day, with some clear insights, right?
Right.
Rather than a bunch of 90 reports, right? And that forces thought, right? And that simplifies things, that actually gets you to the core problem solving first without
Sure.
wasting time on a lot of other stuff which you can always build later on, right? I think that's the core value add I bring to startups, I would say.
Oh, wow. And how many have you invested in? You don't
So
want to talk about that?
no, so there are about 3 or 4 active ones, and
Okay.
I don't believe in just put money and forget, right? I mean,
Sure.
because I mean, it doesn't at least doesn't excite me for that. So I have checkpoints, and I respect founder boundaries.
Sure.
It's their baby, it's their story. So I balance in hands off, total hands off approach, and working with them with gentle nudges.
Right. No, I love the part that you said, right? 5% is all what the customers care.
Correct.
Now, that's when you're starting a startup, when the
Yeah.
idea is, mushrooming. Now, let's take a larger setup that you worked with, the one that at scale, like a Walmart, right? So you have two pieces of it from a technology perspective, from a business perspective, and a customer angle.
Yeah.
How did you were, of course, you were a distinguished architect there.
Yeah.
A lot of people in India don't know that, senior distinguished architects like a pricey position to have. But I'd like to ask you, how did you maneuver that at Walmart?
Yeah, I think see in a e-commerce space like Walmart, right? You have lot of things to take care of, right? One is first of all customer journey,
Yeah.
customer satisfaction, traffic shaping. When
Correct.
people search for blue shirt, are they landing on you versus your competition? So that is a key important thing,
True.
right? Tech systems uptime is a very important thing. Compliance is a big thing, right? So and the key to success is business, product, tech working together to solve the problems, right? The minute it is a waterfall, that business ideates something, then it goes to product, then it goes to tech, I think that is a recipe for failure.
Right.
Because you abstract out details, you assume things, and it's just slow, right? You spend 1 month, 3 months, probably the problem you're trying to attempt has already gone,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So one thing we did at Walmart, right, and I actually was one of the initial proponents of the ideas is we made something called four in a box. So you got business, product, tech, and ops all together solving the problems, right?
Like a
And
pod.
like a pod, right? And few key things, right? One is having a common currency for prioritization, right? So let's say you have 4 things to do. One is build a new feature, one is cut costs for whatever reason, operational cost, one is a tech rewrite, someone wants to rewrite the feature, right? Generally you want people to talk in terms of the same currency.
Interesting.
So example, right, one thing we did is, and different companies have different things, is one thing we said is, if you save 1 rupee, it's equivalent to you saying you will get 2 rupees from a new feature, right? So that's how we prioritize tech ruggedization. If it's a core journey like a search or fulfillment, etc., it's worth 100 rupees,
Right.
right? So then decisions, prioritization and decision making becomes easy,
Sure.
right? So it's hard to define this, but once you get it defined, you move fast,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
The other thing is implement metrics. Many people are very wishy-washy about metrics, right? They say customer happiness, which is a very fluid and meaningless metric, right? I mean, it's very difficult to measure. And then business will say, I want customers to be happy. And then the question needs to be asked is, what is the lead metrics to happiness? What is something that can be measured, right? You can measure very easily someone clicking a link.
Correct.
It's very easy to measure, right?
Correct.
As a techie, as a tech system, right? Very difficult to measure happiness or even session times, right? Which is slightly less weird than customer happiness, but something that difficult to measure. The more you focus on measurable metrics, which you implement in a dashboard, and all four of the folks are looking at them together when deciding things, it makes things smoother.
Interesting. But I do recall that Walmart did have a customer happiness index.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah,
This
so
was
it was a big company, like I
sure.
tried, or so I used to push back on such things, right?
Right.
And my product used to be, I had business teams across the globe. So I had like a Europe business team, South America, US, and all used to come to me with different requirements,
Right.
and I was the focal point
Sure.
because I kind of figured out how to, my team rather, we figured out how to get stuff done for various geos, and it was very difficult, right?
Got it.
I mean, if you are a Mexico CEO, you would say this is like life or death for me, right? Where a UK guy will say this is life and death, and sometimes they have orthogonal requirements,
Correct. Correct.
right? What you
Yeah.
want is exactly what the other guy doesn't want,
Correct.
right? So we had to develop this framework very quickly, get buy-in from all people. So some of the things is what we implemented. Don't come with wishy-washy metrics. Implement the metrics first, right? Before you say that you want to improve something, first measure it crisply, correctly in a dashboard, right? So that helped us prioritize.
So let's say there are a few e-commerce initial startup entrepreneurs who are watching this show, and they want to measure what will excite a customer. Can you think of 3 parameters that they should look at, which could be meaningful in terms of measurable?
Yeah, so I mean, let's look at the funnel, right? Someone has to come to your app first, right? So that's your traffic shaping thing, right? How
Correct.
well is your app doing on SEO or the app store, right?
Right.
When someone is using Apple search and finding shirts, so and that generally can be, there's a tech involved there, and it's also a function of how much you are bidding for keywords, etc., right? But once the person lands, then the funnel is totally in your hand,
Right.
right? So conversion rates is a key funnel, right? Out of the 100 people that land on your landing page, how many people bounce away? How many people go back without even clicking deeper,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
If there's a search on your app, right? When people type something, do they click on anything or not? So it's a null search,
Right.
right? Then you can go deeper into it, right? Okay, this null search is a clear bad sign that something is not working. A
Correct.
smaller problem would be click depth. You search something and people are clicking at the 10th item, or they're scrolling to the page 2
Right.
before, right?
Right.
That's a problem because
Okay.
if most people are searching for page 2, maybe the stuff needs to be on page 1,
Pitch one. Right. Yeah.
right?
True.
So
True.
so so the conversion funnels start from there. And lastly, I mean, if you look at the typical e-commerce, you have discovery, which is search, then you have a detail page, and then you have the checkout and the payment process, right? So other key metric beside conversion funnel is customer NPS, how happy people are with the journey, right? And that will help you discover more problems. So one problem for us was price fidelity. In search, you see something; in detail, you see something else. When you go out to pay, probably some GST or something else is added, and people are frustrated. So
Correct.
I saw 100 rupees, I'm paying
So much
so
more.
much more, right? So that comes out as a metrics, and once you know the problem, you can solve it.
Right.
So I would
Right.
say focus on the funnel first, right? Understand your drop off points, how customers are doing, right? And yeah.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Yeah, very advisory. Thank you so much for that. So let's actually go into what you're doing right now. Yeah, Angel One. Yeah, and it's along with scale comes one more box, regulatory. Right. So from a tech and a business angle, how have you gone about with Angel One? How has the journey been for you?
Yeah, so let me start with the mechanics, right? I think Angel One of FinTech is I consider it another version of e-commerce, right? Whatever
Is
we
it?
discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just that the inventory is slightly more complicated because shirts, if you search for a red shirt will always be there.
Correct.
But let's say you want to buy Reliance at 1800, it's not always going to be there, right? The
Correct.
price fluctuates. So that's the added complication, right? So the let's talk about the mechanics of broking, right? So finally there's an exchange, right, where there are two queues, buyers and sellers, right? If you're selling something for the least, you are in the front of the queue,
Correct.
right? So it's sorted in ascending way. And whether you're buying something, if you are willing to pay more for it, you go right up to the front of the queue
Correct.
for a specific asset or instrument, right? So it's sorted descending, right? And then matching happens on the exchange. Now what people want to do is people want to get into the queue, they want to first understand what's the queue like, how many buyers, sellers, what's the price like, and they want to get into the queue first, right? So for us as an app, right, we have two or three basic functions. One is we want to pipe the data from the exchange onto the millions of apps connected, so you get a clear view of prices, right?
And seamless as well, right?
Yes,
It's quick.
it's
Yeah.
quick, right?
Yeah.
It's not latent. And if you see 100 rupees here, it should not be 105. Otherwise, you're going to make a mistake, right?
Correct.
So that is a problem to solve. Secondly, once you decide to place an order, we need to ship your order to the exchange as fast as possible.
Correct.
So this is unlike e-commerce, where
Right.
generally in a traditional retail e-commerce, once you say check out the cart, it's all an asynchronous flow, and
Right.
you have some more time to fulfill it. Here
Sure.
you need to be in the queue as fast as possible. So that is the main problems we try to solve.
So
And
agility and latency, you're saying?
yeah, latency, minimizing latencies and doing it at scale. Right. So if you look at our traffic peaks, it's like Swiggy, but AM PM reversed, right? So 9:15 market start. Before that, there is very little traffic modest traffic, and then there's a steep ramp. And we have to handle the steep ramp at 9:15 when people have thought about
The
what they
market
want to
opens.
do. Yeah. Right. And you got so many, like you got like millions of web sockets from via which we ship prices. So you need to make sure things are perfect day in, day out, right? So those are challenges.
You're right. So if I were to ask you from a perspective of, while I like the case study that you were talking about, that it has to go figure out what is the actual current price. So while you began the journey, were there times when things didn't go as per, what were the challenges that you faced with?
Yeah, incidentally, the day I joined, we were just post IPO. Scale was growing, but still
Right.
modest. But
Okay.
we were down for the whole day.
Down for the whole day.
Yes. So that
Oh
was
Lord.
my, even before my induction, and I was wanted to meet people. I happened to be on an email chain where people are saying there's an issue and there's a call going on. This is
Okay.
COVID time, so everyone is working from home.
Remote.
Yeah, remote. So I joined the call, and one thing which was something which I found not great was people were not getting to what was the actual problem.
Okay.
Right. I think a common thing was who's responsible for this and stuff like that was going on. So those, it took a while to get both people, process, and tech right. It needed to move all three. Right. You need to move tech, which is slightly easier, right? You can rewrite systems. Changing people, like you have ops. Let's say you have an ops person who's been spent 20 years with a setup. Right? There's a way the person is tuned to operate with the setup.
Correct.
Right now, if I give him a dashboard and say, hey, don't call me. This is a dashboard. Everything happens on its own. There's a lot going behind in the person's mind,
Correct.
right? Will this
Right.
tech take over me?
Sure.
Will my jobs will still be relevant? Having to manage both and the process part as well, right? Telling business that, part of that I told business I need a 3 month moratorium on new features. I want to make sure things are, things still, the lights are on first.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So yeah, so that was something interesting.
Right. So generally, I'm sure challenges crop up everywhere, right? Whether it is trading or it is e-commerce or the other places that you work with. So what are the, top three things you do generally to when you're going through a challenge or an opportunity?
Right. So I think first thing is avoid premature optimization or platformization. So I think most techies, and I am a fault to that as well, we map problems to solutions we know.
Okay.
Right. So
Can we go a little deeper on that?
yeah. So generally, for example, you say you want, there's a transactional database and you want a read-only copy, and the
Right.
read side is very heavy. Someone tells you the read scale is going to be pretty big compared to the writes. This is a common use case, right? And Google, and they all have patterns. Like this is called CQRS. So you write somewhere, and it's actually Amazon has made a perfected some of this stuff, right? So it is a tech, but it comes with a lot of its own challenges. If you have like a cluster of servers where one is taking the write and you have multiple people taking the reads, right? You can do that and it serves a purpose, but then there are a lot of gotchas that you need to solve. Right? For example, some readers might be out of sync. Then you need to have, if the writer goes down, you need leader re-election between the rest of the nodes. What do you do with stale reads? So there are a lot of complicated scenarios you need to handle.
Sure.
But what you may not realize is you're not Google.
Correct.
You don't have that scale, right?
Right.
And many times a single database, by having a slightly different index, does solve a lot of your problems, right? So instead of just seeing what you read in a blog and just implementing that on day zero, you should start by building the most simplest thing possible, right? And actually see where it is failing in your own context.
So you're saying apply your mind rather than
Right.
go
Start
with the flow.
simple. Right.
Right.
And
Start simple.
when I
Okay.
ask this when interviewing people, right, most people they start with distributed system. I will
Yeah,
have a
I've heard it too.
database and I will have caches here and Kafka here and all that. I said no, solve it as if you're solving. Solve it in a single machine first. Right. Write code for it.
Sure.
Right. Pseudo code for it. Whatever. Right. To solve it within a single instance. Right. Then you know what to scale.
Correct.
If you start building blocks and start distributing things from day zero, right, without you understanding the problem or you understanding the scale or the context, you are bound to overcomplicate. And once you overcomplicate, you will spend a lot of time solving problems which you don't need to solve, and that is a travesty
Sure.
in our business.
Sure. So even when problems are thrown at your face, you start with figuring out what the problem is.
Yeah.
If I'm correct.
Yeah.
Then you find a simple solution which will address the problem.
Correct. First is measure.
Right.
What is the actual problem you're trying to see, right? And sometimes the easiest solution go live. So someone tells me, figure out, use data science and figure out this and that. Most of the time, you don't need data science. Right?
Is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You're sure you're saying this on a
Absolutely.
platform where
Yeah. Most of the time, you don't need data science. Actually, you should start building a solution without too much complications. One
Okay.
basic thing, right?
Okay.
And figure out what it is not solving. Right, rather than bringing a plethora of tooling which you have learned, right, and trying to see whether it fits or not, because then it's very difficult to pivot.
True, because you've already created a monster.
Yeah, you created a monster, and when, let's say, you are my CEO and say no, I want slightly different, right, then it takes a lot of time for me to pivot.
redo. Yeah.
Right, and then you are frustrated, I am frustrated, right? You are frustrated, why is Jyoti moving slow? I am frustrated, why is Rupa changing her mind? The
Right.
reality is both of us will do that. You will figure out and explore what makes sense for the business to do, right? And my job is actually to move with you in speed, in lockstep, as iterate, right? The minute I have like lot of this like bells and whistles, it slows us down.
But on the contrary, Jyoti, what you're saying, I agree with. But on the contrary, if I were to look at it now, let's think of companies which started off small, didn't expect the kind of scale. But if I'm just going to solve for the problem I have at hand and not look at the bigger cursory effect, then I'll have to re-architecture the entire platform, right?
Yes.
How does that work in your side of the world?
Yeah, and it's not something which is a bad thing.
Okay, it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, right?
Okay.
I mean,
Tell us more. Why is it not a bad
so
thing?
first thing is the fact that you need to re-architect means that your business is successful, right? I mean, so that's
Okay, that's a unique way of looking at it.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
that's really right. I mean, because you're getting more users. So
Sure,
okay,
sure.
so congrats, right? 95% of startups don't end up there. So you are already at top of the funnel, right? And then once you actually solve, and I've done this at a bunch of places, at GoIPO, Angel, etc., right? You don't need to solve everything. Coming to a e-commerce funnel, right? You have like search, detail, and payouts, right? Payment gateways. Generally, the scale at the payment thing is not very high. So in GoIPO also, if I remember, right, we didn't change that. It was built in Python Django, which is a pretty unique stack, right?
Yep.
So, and we never changed it. We built Golang microservices. We built a lot of other things for the rest to scale. Like search, we really re-engineered the e-commerce search, right? With the detail paging, how we added offers, all that was re-architected. But booking and the final payout, it was not broken. The scale that was being thrown at that system, it was able to handle.
Sure.
So you can starve out, what is broken and fix it separately. You don't need to change the entire thing.
Got it.
Right. Similarly, data science, right? Coming to saying when you have heuristics and the heuristics start becoming very very complicated.
Correct.
That's a great time to say, okay, I want to invest in data science now. Right. So, for example, if you are programming, if you are spending on programmatic ads, and you have lot of if-else conditions, if the person is in, west of India, and if is, he or she is above 45 and something something, show this keyword, then it's better to get to data science. But you don't need data science on day one.
Correct. True. Only at a certain point.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. So, from a perspective of Angel, and because you're dealing with so many customers, can you talk about even customer data? How have you gone about making sure there is
Yeah.
privacy maintained and stuff?
Yeah, so if you look at data and how there are three main patterns for data, right? First is I ask what is Rupa's date of birth? Very specific question, the toughest one, right? The second one is
I'm
like,
not answering.
yeah, no,
Sorry.
I'll get to that. The second one is this Rupa? Where I don't need to store Rupa. I can hash Rupa's
Correct.
name, email,
Correct.
and all, and I can do a equality check.
Sure.
Yeah, I never store Rupa.
Right.
This is how we typically handle like pin codes and stuff like that. We never store your pin codes.
Okay.
We store the hashes, right?
Okay.
So when you put in your pin code, it's hashed, and then we figure out
It's like an
equality.
autofill, right? Then it brings up my
Yeah,
details.
I mean, in the sense we never store it,
You never store it. Okay.
right? Because we transform it and then we compare what is transformed.
Okay.
Right. In the first case, I can't transform it because you actually want your date of birth, right? So I
Right.
can't put XYZ there.
Correct.
I have to give whatever the date of birth is.
Sure.
And the third is most complicated search. When you have something like an inverted index and you're searching for like customers and you say ROO, then I need Rupa, right? So I need to store data there. So these are three query patterns essentially. You need to handle things for each query pattern slightly differently. So we have two main things. Right? One is, as far as possible, we try not to store the data. Right, as I said, MPINs, Aadhaar. We don't store the full Aadhaar. We store the masked Aadhaar and stuff like
But the
that.
KYC, you have to still take those details, right?
So so when you say KYC, right? So we need some documents for government. Um, like for example, when you push data to the depositories and all. So that
Right.
is just we are handling.
It's a flow.
It's a flow.
Okay.
Right. Many times when we need to store it, we tokenize it. Right. So for example, everywhere else, Rupa's date of birth is XYZ.
Got it. Understood.
Right. And
Got
there's
it.
only one vault where we actually do XYZ. So we actually need to secure that vault.
Very interesting.
Right, because everywhere else in the logs, many developers put things in logs. This is a common problem. They log requests and responses and stuff like that. Oh, Rupa asked for date of birth and I replied, now because if that person replies XYZ, nobody, if the logs are compromised, right?
Right.
Nobody goes to know your actual PII. So
Correct.
it's only the vault that we need to secure.
Very
So
nice.
tokenization and encryption is something that we do. So we re-encrypt stuff. We have a continuous re-encryption. So whatever the vault is, right, the keys that we use, we continuously re-encrypt with newer and newer
This
keys.
is very similar to how crypto is done, right?
Yes.
Tokenization and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. Very interesting. So that's how my data is secure.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So you're telling a lot more people to jump onto your platform, Angel.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So let's go into what's been the buzzword of of the hour, which is Gen AI. Of course, we'd heard of AI. Now where people are talking about Gen AI. What are the few advancements you're planning at Angel?
So I'll give two examples where, so I have a small team called Labs where we.
Okay. Okay. Define small.
So small is like 10 people.
Okay.
Or 10, one designer.
Okay.
So 11.
Sure.
Right. And we try to figure out how do we move the needle. And, what do we look 5 years and how things will change. So I have two problems related to this we are trying to just scope out, right? So the first one, like if you look at generative AI, it's all about token prediction, right? So you have a sentence, right, saying this model was dash, right? And then you start predicting what is the next token, right? And it has things like embeddings. Model has a specific representation in a vector space, right? And then that is enriched by what's in and around.
Okay.
Right, this model was right, and model could be a machine learning model, it could be a fashion model, it could be a lot of different
Sure.
things, right? And what is before the words generally has adds meaning to the last word model.
Okay.
Right, so whatever is before adds meaning to the last word.
Understood.
Right. This is the attention part, which is new in the Gen AI thing. Right. The words behind you kind of add context to you. In a most simplest way of explaining. Right. Now this is language generation. Right. If you look at financial things like your quarterly results or prices or agricultural production, everything is a time series, right? So something happened
Yeah, correct.
yesterday, day before yesterday, right? And if you can reasonably predict, right, if all these different time series, how it's going to affect a sector or a company, right?
Sure.
So that is a very valuable information.
Wow. Now I can actually tie it to what Angel will do with this, right?
Yes, right. So you can imagine, right? So we can say
So
we
speculation basically.
correct. We, for example, we believe that ice cream companies will do a good job in the next quarter. Right? It's not speculation; it's an informed guess, right? So why? Because let's say we have temperatures in Bangalore on a daily basis, right? And we see temperatures going up, and the average of the temperatures is more. Then we infer that when temperatures go up, people buy ice creams, and this is no heuristics. We look at news, we look at news, we look at what comes together when it's hot, and what brands, and because our set of brands is small, companies is 700 companies on Nifty, right? 700 important companies on Nifty, and their businesses, right? And so the target universe is small, so all these events happening, Bangalore is hot, that how also the 700 companies, what impact would it have, right? At least a directional thing we can say, it's positive or negative, right? Air conditioners, you can quickly figure out, right? If things are getting hot, air conditioners, ice creams, dairy manufacturers, people who make coke are going to go up, right? Someone who's sending you blankets probably his business is not going to be that great, right? So you can predict directional things, right? And then it gives you into sectoral rotation, money flows from one sector to another,
Correct.
right? And even in our tech side, blockchain was pretty big some time back.
Yeah, it
Now
was.
it's Gen AI.
Yeah.
So money keeps flowing. If you can see where the wave is, we can help people make informed decisions.
So let's also add a little bit of fluidity to our discussion, right? Let's bring recession in. Yeah. So let's say that, with economic standards, things go up and down. So, in fact, the purchasing power parity also may have. How is Gen AI going to contribute to that? I mean, are you adding variables to the whole thing? Because what you just said was extremely fixed pattern, right?
Yes.
So, what if there are variables to this?
Yeah, so this is the second part in which we are trying to do, and the
Okay.
second part is very simple: financial assistance. Right? We have all had various level of financial advisors available to us. Right? For me, it started as a relative, and he just told me, "Sign this. This is your SIP." And like I was like I was a kid,
Like
right?
a zombie. Yeah,
Yeah,
just sign
like
it.
you know how it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Kaka or someone comes to you like,
Kaka tells you do this
yeah,
thing.
you start doing that, right? So and even with the best of advisors, right? You ask yourself questions like,
Correct.
how fiduciarily responsible is this firm,
Correct.
right? If I take let's say 10 lakhs from you, you say, how much is he going to be keeping, right? How much is his expense ratio?
Sure.
Will he optimize? Will I tell you, Rupa, I've taken 10 lakhs for you, but things are not going well, or I don't know what to do?
Correct.
It's a very good thing to say. Here's
Sure.
your money back,
Right.
right? You would think that, and most people don't do that, right? So we are looking at a agent which is knows the domain, the financial domain, knows about you, knows about Rupa. For example, is Rupa risk averse, right? Is Rupa loss averse? Were very different things, right? Do you hate losing money, right? So we can optimize for you, or do you do not want to take risks, right? So understanding you is first step in solving for you. I can throw in generic stuff, right?
So
Just put me.
personalization you're talking
Yeah,
about, right?
exactly. It's a very abused word, but I didn't want to say it.
Sorry.
No, but so solving for you is very important. Understanding you is very important in solving for you. So there's very different problems. And the third one is this ethical and fiduciary responsibility. Right? Luckily, there are a set of tests which universities are working on to test out all these factors. So and using a foundational model like GPT and all, we can add a thin layer on top, and then we can run these regression tests. So if I add some little bit of more context to this model and start answering questions as a financial advisor on all these three attributes, how am I doing? Am I optimizing for brokerage, for example, when I am telling you stuff, or am I optimizing for you? Do I understand your choices very well or not? Right?
Sure.
So that's the second part. I think that is going to be, if you're able to, it's a hard problem, but whoever handles it, I think that's it, because I think that's the most important problem for a person.
Sure.
With macroeconomics being what they are, and things going up and down, people want to secure their futures,
Absolutely.
and they cannot take decisions on their own.
Correct.
The choices, the amount of mutual funds that they are there, how different each is from another, they're complicated choices, right? And you need help.
Right. Can I add one more attribute? I know
Sure.
I added it's called an attribute, right?
Yeah,
First,
yeah.
it's not a variable rather. So what about time value for money? Are you guys thinking of that as well with Gen AI?
Yeah, so I mean, we have very good math models. And so there's no in terms of black shoals and all for time value. So if you're
Okay.
putting in 10 rupees and you're expecting 20 rupees, how much is the actual money that you'll earn, considering your, considering the time value of money, right? So there are fixed equations in that space.
Okay.
So right now we are not exploring that right now.
Sure.
We are just solving for these three attributes. Again, it's a personal thing. How much work 10 people can do. I don't want to put in more.
So I hear you're hiring for this team.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so what are the kind of people that you'd be interested who can actually will leave your handle so they can write to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want problem solvers, right? And problem solvers who are literally full stack, right from design. So I love engineers who debate with designers saying this button should be blue. For whatever, because
Reasons.
for
Yeah.
reasons, whatever they are, finally we disagree and commit, but they have skin in the game.
Sure.
They understand the problem, right from design to either back end, front end, both, and data science. I am, I have enough PhD data scientists, but even if they are PhD, I would prefer a PhD who's an engineer, someone who writes code, who can work with models and who can actually take things to prod
End to end.
end to end, right? I
Okay.
think those are the kind of people we want, because we are not solving academic questions here, to be very
Correct.
honest, right?
These are real life
Real life
situations.
problems. They're difficult problems, good problems, but they're not academic in nature, right?
Correct. So do you have timelines for your releases? I mean, if you're looking at Gen AI, I mean, you spoke about
So
few
some
things.
of these problems we want to put out only after we are very sure, because our regulatory constructs are very severe,
Correct.
right? So we can't just put out things like this, so it's a, I think Pramod Verma said it in GFF. That Bangalore is in 2035, Mumbai is in 2025, and Delhi is in 2015. So we have to work with
All
all our stakeholders
correct.
to make sure they're comfortable,
Sure.
they understand what's happening, what are the guardrails, because we can, with some things like this, we can move a lot of the needle very fast. So we're slow here. So we experiment on closed user groups and all, but going live, we will take our time on some of these things.
No, it's valid as well, right?
Yeah.
Because customers will also. It's also in terms of how each one uses the available
Yeah,
data,
yeah,
right?
and to prevent fraud and all the other
Correct.
things.
Correct. Makes sense. So, Jyoti, before we wrap up, I have one question to ask you because I've known you from a time that you've been in an IC and then you started handling a team. Now you tell me that you're handling a 500 member org. So, two set of questions.
Sure.
So, what's your advice for people who want to be closer to tech problems? That is, individual contributors. What should they actually look for? And the second question that I have is if they want to transition like you did from this role to this role, what are the few things that they would compromise or they would have to see it in a different day of light?
These are great questions, right? So I think as an IC, and there are two brands of IC, right? One is a principal engineer,
Correct.
right? Someone who's deep into a tech of the person's choice. So this could be like front end or back end or data science or whatever, right? If you really believe that's your place where you're going to maximize your talent, then you should go deep. Don't digress. Don't try to kind of don't try to average yourself out by saying I will also learn front end coding, right? Because you're not. You are a back end person.
Correct.
Then stick to
Stick
it.
to it.
Be
Yeah.
really good at it, and there'll always be huge demand for people who can solve those type of problems, right? Now there are other sets of brand of ICs, right, who are horizontal,
Correct.
right, and they talk to businesses and then they map the problem into lower level constructs which can then be solved in a much easier way. So they are more business problem solvers rather than tech solvers. They understand tech obviously to great detail, they still code, but their job more is translating business
Solution architect kind of.
correct. A solution architect is
I know it's a
one
it's
end of the spectrum.
but
But
yeah,
there are a lot of people who work with business product and
sure.
scope down the features, right? I think that is a segue to uh, a top tech leadership role.
What do you call them?
So generally, that's a difficult thing. So I call these engineers, the one who are heavily focused.
Correct, correct.
They'll
Experts like your
experts, right?
SMEs.
They'll know in production what line of code is affecting that, right? So they see incident, and I have some folks who, some guy who who inherited lot of very suboptimal code and like stored procedures. Like I remember there's a file with 50,000 lines of stored procedure, and he was able to correlate rather something that happened in prod to this specific line of SQL code, which is
Wow. Mind blowing.
mind blowing, right? So
Yeah.
we have guys like we have people like those. The other kind of people we call it architects,
Right.
right? Because that's what they do. They talk to business, product, compliance, and then they build like a dabbas, and this is how the system will look like,
Frameworks, yeah.
right? So that's how we are looking at it, right?
Sure, sure. And what about the second set of questions that I asked? If they want to transition from here to what you're doing today, building large teams,
Yeah,
building
so
large.
I think as a building large teams, the first thing you need to figure out is how do you enable people, right? So there's management and leadership, right? So as a manager, if you are just if you are looking at people's it doesn't scale well compared to leadership, right? And I think for ICs, getting into a leadership role is much easier than getting into a managerial role.
Correct.
And there will be, and sometimes it is confusing what is leadership and what is managerial. Managerial means you are over indexed on, let's say, things like stakeholder management and getting out metrics or story pointing or stuff like that, where those kind of folks can get bored,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Leadership is a whole different thing. Leadership is, it's I think about people, it's a very wrong thing to say, is exactly the way I think about systems. I want to build a massive castle of really good people. What are the building blocks? How do I make sure these castles work together? Those building blocks work together, look beautiful as a castle, right? How things don't fall into place. How it can work without me being part of it, right? I think that is the way I look at it.
Very beautifully said. So when people want to shift gears from being ICs to becoming a leader,
Yeah.
I'll redefine that. What are the few things they have to compromise on? Because you've
Yeah. I think first thing is don't solve the problem. Right? If you open your mouth first, right, you set biases, right, and then it becomes an echo chamber.
Right.
I say something, oh, we should use Kafka. Everyone says, yes, we should use Kafka.
Right.
So that's a very critical thing to avoid. So generally, avoid giving opinions on technical solutions.
Sure.
Right? It's difficult. You need to
Hold yourself back.
hold yourself back, right? And especially when someone is doing something wrong, you need to figure out when to time intervention, right? So that the person can learn. He doesn't, they don't feel as if we are stepping on their toes.
Correct.
Yet you don't impact timelines or production, right? So that's hard. You need, it takes a little bit of practice and errors to get it right? So that's one. Secondly, I think the basic logistics of it, 500 people org, in terms of budgets and stuff like that, that is something that you need to understand very well, right? How do you budget something? How do you budget for HR, non-HR costs, especially in a regulatory changing way, right? That is an art and a science that you learn.
Sure.
I think the third is stakeholder management, which is something new, right? When people rely on you and building those relationships, like speaking tech to a business person and speaking business to a tech person, right? So you wear both hats,
Sure.
complementary hats. That's something that you do because people respect ICs. This is
Right.
what
Right.
everywhere that I see, right? An IC walks in the room, everybody nods their head and says, "Great, yes." Nobody respects a CTO. They think I am either I am either being lazy or I'm protecting teams or I have some other agendas
Sure.
and stuff like that. So nobody takes me on. I have to solve a problem together with the stakeholder, saying
Got it.
this is why. And generally, it's like when they say why is this taking time or why can't we do this? It's a step by step thing. I just can't say and in earlier lifetime, I was able to say,
Just
no,
walk into the room and say,
just
get this.
say, no, we won't do this, and
Yeah.
people will say, okay, he said we won't do this. So, yeah, so you miss that. You miss that. You
Very
need to, yeah,
interesting. Very interesting. It's actually a flip side to what people don't know and they don't watch out for, right?
yeah.
So, very beautifully said. Before we wrap up the show, would you like to have any few words? Would you like to share with the audience anything in specific?
No, I think generally, I think on the career paths, right? I don't think there are any irreversible decisions, right? You have one life, and you have to make sure that you explore all avenues before you kind of retire, right? So don't be afraid. Don't get pigeonholed yourself, right? Try to see what you're good at. Try to explore. And there's a huge lifetime for young engineers, right?
Absolutely.
So don't worry. And we live in very interesting times even now, right?
Correct.
If you have
Correct.
creativity, you have talent, you are able to basically do anything that you dream of. So I think exciting times. Don't get bogged down. Don't get pigeonholed.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming on our
Baba.
show, Jyoti. It was really marvelous having this chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.